realize is this is event number 119 since July of 2009, when a handful of us got together and thought maybe we would offer a place for a little bit esoteric content in a more conversational environment. You probably know that this weekend, Friday and Saturday, there was a BSides, I'm turning around, wherever Puerto Rico is from here, and also Rochester, New York. Cactus Con was out in Phoenix, which started life as a BSides. This is a community of communities, and it's really freaking awesome to be part of it. We are at 59 unique cities in 11 countries so far. The green dots are new cities hosting an event for the first time this year. We're finally making it into Asia and India with Singapore. Kuala Lumpur is up in the air, but Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad, and Dubai are new this year, plus a handful in the eastern United States. It is amazing, and it's a way to connect and develop your own presentation skills, find audiences, connect with people who are like-minded, and it is why I put an insane amount of time and effort into it, because it's just freaking awesome to be part of it. That said, this talk is about Infosec survival skills. This is how to not just survive in this industry, but thrive in what can be a challenging industry. Alex Hutton gave a great talk this morning. A lot of this will dovetail with what Alex said, and a lot of this is based on the stress and burnout research that a group of us did in the past few years. And so we'll touch on some of that research, but this talk is looking at it from the other side. This talk is about not just surviving in this industry, but thriving, being productive, and being happy. Now, I know some of you who know me or know of me are surprised that I'm talking about being happy. This is not something I'm noted for. So I will share with you my working title for this presentation, which gets cut off there. What's wrong with happy people? And I was trying to solve this problem, because there are some genuinely happy people in our industry. I won't embarrass them by calling them out, but you know who they are. Right, well, Shaq, for one. It's just, why this topic? Well, again, don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain, but I actually like you people. Almost every one of you. I have an unhealthy fondness for some people in this community. People in this community are family to me more than my actual family. There are people that I know I can rely on in this community more than I can rely on family. That's not a shot at my family, that's the nature of us fighting a common battle and the interconnectedness that the internet gives us. Why today? Because there's all sorts of cool stuff that we've talked about in the past day and a half, and there's more to come. If you're here this week for SANS or Infosec World as well, there's more stuff that's going to come up with you, and you're going to want to do more. You're going to want to drive education in a direction that makes a difference. You're going to want to drive your career in a direction that makes a difference, and if you can't find the energy, if you can't find the contentment with what you're doing to do it, you're not going to get there. You're also not going to be able to help other people move forward. No, that doesn't work. Okay, disclaimer, you know more than I do. I'm okay with that as long as you share. So stress and burnout research. This started a few years ago. It has, yeah, there's no way I'm going to correct that now. So, stress and burnout research team. This started a few years ago. How did this start? This started with mutual support. This started with people like Alex and Josh Corman and Gal Sponsor and myself getting together either via Skype or via Twitter or picking up the phone or seeing each other in person and saying, how you doing? I know you changed jobs, got a new kid, how's things going? You seem a little stressed when I saw you, whatever. And then that got a little more and more formal. Martin McKay and I talked about it when he was still a QSA. That's a fairly high stress job, or can be depending on where you work. And so this little circle of people who are a large part of this extended internet family of mine and of ours started taking, hey, what about him? And we started expanding the circle of who we looked at and started looking at some of the other issues. And so this is the team that came together to make some things happen and did some formal research. Martin McKay, Josh Corman, Stacy Thayer, actual PhD in psychology. She's not a clinician, but she's Ken Yared, who was working towards one as a PhD in psychology, had battles with the university. I know some of you will find that hard to believe, ended up not completing that. Gal sponsor and myself. When we spent a couple of years doing a lot of conversations and research. Also, a lot of the research came from people willing to chat with us about what their experiences were. So this quote, you had mentioned a variant of this. Dan Geer made the comment, security is too wide to master, too deep to know, and too fast to photograph. Let's say this one more. Dan Geer said that security is too wide to master.
Can you put about 800 by 600?
Yeah.
That should
No. I think you go down under 10 to 16. These are mostly text. We're close enough. Yeah. So again, Dan Geer said security is too wide to master. Dan Geer said it's too deep to know. And Dan Geer said security changes too fast to photograph. If Dan Geer can't keep up with this, I'm screwed. Right? I mean, it's just, let's be honest. So what are our jobs? Let's talk about the nature of what happens, especially for those of us on defense, but also the people that are doing red team, right? When you're doing penetration testing, when you're doing just vulnerability assessment, you're doing stuff, you're popping boxes, you're knocking over websites, you're getting shells, you're injecting your sequels, and it's really cool. And then you remember somebody's paying you to help them be more secure, and you haven't even finished your coffee, and it's fallen over, right? You know, 45 minutes to domain admin, and so you get that thrill, and then you realize what that means. It's like, oh. And if you're on the other side, it's just, oh, you don't even get that temporary thrill. So this is the Infosec pose on good days. This is on good days, that's cut off. But this is the Infosec pose on good days. On bad days, pigeons shit on our head too. So how do we cope? So we looked at the research to figure out two things. We went two directions with the research, same set of research, but how do we identify stress and burnout? How do we reach out to people? How do we let people know what they're up against? And how do we avoid that? You know, what works? So we've done several presentations over the years. I've done some, we've done them as a panel. On the stress and burnout side, this talk is flipping it to look at what we found. And what we found was nothing in information security. So we did our own research. First try was ugly. It was a start. It was the best ever done in Infosec. It was also the worst. Second try, we did like Maslow burnout survey in psychological industry standards. And we added some survey content of our own, demographic and other things to get an idea of what was going on. It's not all numbers, as I mentioned. We talked to a lot of people. We got some anecdotes from them, what worked, what didn't work. We had some conversations that were agonizing. The first time we did this as a panel was at BSides Las Vegas a couple of years ago. That was in the non-recorded, no press track, closed room. By the time we had people standing up and showing scars on their wrists from suicide attempts, everybody's nerves in the room were pretty raw, but we reached people. And I think we did some good on that end. What I want to do is, let's not get there. Let's figure out what it is that keeps us driving forward. So, the first survey was, mostly Twitter people followed and it responded. Biases galore, selection bias, confirmation bias was advertised as a stress survey, so people interested. So it just had, it was worse than a Ponemon survey. Non-randomized, blah, blah, blah. But it was some data, and there were some interesting things. Strongly agree, these are the things that correlate maybe to how we avoid trouble. I have a strong support network of people I can count on. We actually scored pretty good in this. And these were people that self-selected to be interested in stress and burnout. It's like we do have a support network. Again, this room, this event is is creating connections and reinforcing connections that do that. Here's the one that's fantastic, and it's also double-edged. My work is valuable to me. We do this because we think it's cool. This stuff is valuable. Other people value the work we do. Yeah, we don't kid ourselves quite as much about that one, but we still think people value what we do. Now that may not be our bosses, by the way. We didn't specify. You know, maybe teammates, but somebody else values what we do. Why are you in the industry? Make the world a safer place. A lot of us have the cop gene or whatever you want to call that, but we don't like the, you know, we don't want to do that. This one is one of the most stunning numbers, and this has been borne out other places. We do this because we get to think. We like to think. We like hard stuff. We like puzzles, right? I mean, we love the ability to do this. Pay, it's all right, not bad. I mean, there are a lot of industries that look a lot worse, but we're not in it for the money, which is, you know, best and worst. These were just words thrown out, and those are cut off, so I'll come back to them. The worst was the stuff you all know, right? The stuff that we hate, egos and rock stars and corporate politics and hype and FUD. And if we come back to this one, yeah, just read. Things that we love. The sense of community, the ability to learn, we have fun, come to events like this and a bunch of other ones. Plenty of job opportunities if you have the right skill set, right? And for some people in security, it's hard to find a job. Other people with certain skill sets and experience have people continuously hounding them for gigs. Great conferences, innovations, working with and for really smart people. Right? I mean, there are an amazing number of truly brilliant people in this room. If you go to any of our conferences, well, almost any. I won't name names, but there are some where you won't be surrounded by smart people. So more data, second survey. This is the one where we use the Maslow in the industry standard. Burnout is defined as a crisis in your relationship with work if you're a professional. There are different categories of this test. So if you look at the Maslow, if you're doing social work or medical work or things like that, it's a relationship issue between you and people. In the professional fields, it's relationship with work. There are three key criteria that are measured. Exhaustion, not just physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion. And you guys all know that these are tired. Now, the older I get, the harder it is to do the long, overnight stuff. I don't do that anymore. I can survive longer than somebody my age and my shape should be able to on 3 hours of sleep a night for weeks on end. I don't recommend it, but we get going, and if we think we're accomplishing something, our body just starts cranking out dopamine, all sorts of cool things to keep us going. And as soon as we think it's not worth it, we just crash hard, right? But that's exhaustion. Cynicism. This is what's there defined in the standard as indifference or distant attitude towards work. We love what we do. We love the challenges, so this is unusual for us. However, we don't feel that the industry is effective, and that's one of our challenges. So if you're somewhere where it doesn't let you feel satisfied about what you're doing, that's a challenge. The final one is the flip. This is a positive one. How personally efficacious we are. Do we feel we are effective and efficient at our jobs? This is self-reported, and it's also you personally, or the survey respondent personally. That doesn't mean you have to be naive and think that as security we're winning the battle, but that means you think you're contributing. And those are the pieces. So if we looked at these, this survey, as is with the other one, statistically insignificant but potentially informative, which is kind of the way I feel about myself. Overview: 113 male, 111 male, 13 female. I may have to try to fix this. So here's 16 were in need of immediate help, which meant that of those three categories, they scored in the danger zone for 3 out of 3. And so 13% is a little higher, is higher than most professional groups. Females scored worse. There were only 2, but that's carried throughout this because life's not fair for women, because it's just not. And that's universal. We didn't have a small one. But the cool thing is 58 had no warning indicators. So when it came time to look at this side of it, I said, that's almost half of them. Let's look at them. Let's look at the patterns we can find on the happy people. That is the pattern I found. It is stunning. I found all sorts of patterns. Now, I don't know how many of them are real, because as humans, we find patterns where they don't exist, but patterns are what kept us alive on the plains and in the mountains, right? Is that a snake? I don't know. If I jump out of the way and it's not a snake, I'm still alive. If I don't jump out of the way and it is a snake, I'm dead, right? So we find patterns and we're hardwired, but there was no pattern. I can tell you things about age and education and income as far as people likely to be burned out, but there was nothing. So let's move on. Who wants coffee? I always want coffee. This is my stress and burnout machine. I wonder if I can, let's see if I can do this. Bear with me a second. Let me see if I can make these, because I have a hunch this set of slides is really going to suck if I don't do this.
That's one back on one. Water and diabetes.
That is a young Isaac Newton. Okay, let's try something else. One of these is relevant, right?
Window it and distract
Yeah.
I
think we're gonna have to. Let's see. Ooh, that's readable. It cuts off the edge that I don't care about. So there we go, back to the coffee machine. So there's our coffee machine. How does that work? You put water in the top and you put coffee in the middle and you add heat and pressure and stuff comes out the bottom, and sometimes it's bitter and nasty and sometimes it's awesome, right? And that's kind of like a job in life. So we take this stack, this process flow, and the burdens are work, family, personal, and social. Well, they're not always burdens, but those are common burden classes. A lot of those also help us deal with life. The coping methodologies, social, personal, and professional support, how much autonomy and control. This is one of the first things Alex said this morning. This is absolutely true. I'm going to hammer this again and again. Personality and personal coping skills. Some people are better at this. If you've ever seen Dave Shackelford's dressed, you were too drunk and mistook him for somebody else. Shaq just is immune to it. Other people are a little more sensitive, right? And it's worth stopping and saying, as a community, even though we tend to turn on people and eat our young and other dumb shit that we shouldn't do, we do tend to be supportive and inclusive, and we tend to put up with and even encourage differences in personality, if not outright personality disorders. So there's some real issues there that are broader. I mean, you got to be candid, right? I mean, yours, right? So we're not going to dwell on this here, but you know, burnout, what does it end up? Exhaustion, cynicism, depersonalization, we're not as effective, reduced commitment, low productivity, absenteeism, mental illness, substance abuse. Now, it's worth staying here. We have this baseline of we're people. That means a certain number of our community are going to suffer from depression. Mental and physical illness, we're not immune to it. So that is a factor that we have to factor in. Aaron Schwartz was in a bad situation and took his own life. Other people in our community, we get a high profile one at least once a year, unfortunately. We have other issues with substance abuse where some people think that, you know, they can handle it. And, all right, this wasn't supposed to be here, but I'm gonna say this. This is what I remember of Barnaby Jack. He's somebody that I only nodded to in a hall at a con a few times, did not know him personally well. When he passed away, the outpouring of support, of love, of admiration is what I will always remember, is the impact he had on our community globally. That's what I remember. And I would think that is what we should all remember. However, do not be stupid and ignore the fact that a brilliant mind was taken from us by mistakes he made in his recreational use of pharmaceuticals and non-pharmaceuticals. So I'm not going to preach, that's kind of a downer, but I just want to, let's remember how generous and awesome the dude was, but let's not overlook the fact that he did something really stupid. Cocaine and heroin have wiped out, large blocks of people in our lives. That's done. But that's something we have to face, and that doesn't necessarily matter what industry he's in. So the goal here is to draw a big red line through this chart and stay on the top. Burdens: work, family, personal, and social. Work is kind of self-explanatory. If you hate your job, you got a problem. And that may be your problem, it may be the job's problem, more likely it's a combination. Family, man, there's a double-edged sword, right? This is a fantastic source of support, encouragement, comfort, torment, and agony. Often simultaneously, not just on Thanksgiving. But the trick to these is understanding, honestly with yourself, what those levels are. The personal and social stuff, the social stuff. When things that you like doing aren't fun, take a break from them. If you run a hackerspace or really active in a hackerspace and it becomes a burden to go to the hackerspace. If you love to play golf and you find yourself one Saturday morning saying, oh God, again, take a couple weeks off. I mean, that's one of the earliest warning signs that, hey, dumbass, chill, right? Let's do it. There's something else you can do, mow the lawn. But those things can be good. Don't take the things too seriously that you don't have to. Coping mechanisms. This is really where we can do this. So personality, there's not a lot we can do with. Social and professional support is, I'm not advocating that any of us pretend to be professionals, especially if we're interacting, if we personally are in a crisis situation or anybody else is. That's time to turn it over to professionals. You may need to talk to somebody's spouse and steer them that way. But what I'm talking about is the kind of stuff that a lot of us do for each other without really thinking about it. Just put a little more thought into, hey, you seem kind of stressed. BSides, you all right? Things okay? How's that new job going? It is amazing, if you think about this, somebody's, in the past few months has probably said something like this to you. I hope they have. Like, no, you know what? I'm just being a big baby, right? When I complain about my job, you should all tell me to shut up. I have a kick-ass job. I have a lot of fun. I'm here dressed like an idiot, and I'm drinking and I'm pounding coffee now, and I'm having a great time. I travel a lot. It's largely self-inflicted, but I do complain. But every now and then somebody reminds me that I'm a few weeks I'll be in a pub in London on the clock, and I'm like, yeah, all right. So that little friendly nudge reset is good. Just being honest about that, and that mutual support thing, and it's actually safer at that really low level because you're not family, right? You're not close. I don't have to go home and just deal with you. It's just a quick, hey, how you doing, right? I can deal with you in a manageable. That really is the one thing that I'd like people to take away is just a little bit. There's one other thing I will take away. So if you're thinking about that and you think, somebody, so-and-so seemed really stressed BSides Orlando. And so this week you ping them on, Skype or IRC or whatever your method. You say, hey, how you doing? You seemed a little stressed. Things okay? That's cool. If, by the way, next week, like 10 people ping you via Skype and say, hey, dude, how you doing? You seemed a little stressed. Do not be pissed. These are people who care about you. It's easy to get offended by that. But it's like, no, this is legitimately people and there are coping skills. You can step back. It's really hard to do that. But let's look at other things that you can do. So one of the things I've sort of danced around. That is his drummer. That's not B.B. King. That's Lucille. And you need to know what's important. And B.B. King has a fantastic story about the naming of Lucille. Does anybody know the naming story? Love this. 1940, yeah, what was it? Yeah. It was after the, it was right after the war. B.B. King was playing a gig in Twist, Arkansas. He had just bought a new guitar, $35. Actually, it was before the war. And the way the dance halls, union halls were built was they were basically plywood shacks, open wood floor, just a big open room. And the way they heated them was they would put a 55-gallon drum half full of kerosene in the middle of the floor and light it. The band would be at one end playing. There'd be a makeshift bar or whatever on one side or the other, and then people are just mobbing around. Two guys started fighting. During one of BB's performances, two guys began to fight, knocked over the burning barrel. So we have a wooden building, rudely constructed, and now have 25 gallons of burning kerosene running across the wooden floor. The fire got worse. Fire burned out of control. Everybody in BB's band, BB and the band, got out. And he realized he had left his guitar on stage and ran back in and grabbed his guitar. They got in the car and drove off. Next day, he found out that two guys had actually not made it out. There were two fatalities plus some injuries. Two people died in this fire. And he thought about the value of a $35 guitar that he ran in to get and what that meant in life. He realized that it was going to be hard to replace a $35 guitar at that point in his life, but it was not impossible. The woman that the two men were fighting over was named Lucille. Every guitar that he has had since that day has been named Lucille, and he's had dozens of them. You go to hard rock cafes, you'll find authentic Lucilles all over the place. B.B. King came to the realization that he needed a guitar, not that one. He needs a Lucille, not the Lucille. You want a Lucille? It's an ES355 variant. You can, right, Gibson sells it. Guitar Center, American Musical, whoever you buy your access from, you can pick one of these up. Music Trivia, ES355, one of the oddities about that, BB is one of the few people that used the stereo version of that. Actually played a stereo ES355. I'm trying to remember who else was there. A couple people, but that's, you know, music trivia from the musically inept. But anyway, so there's that. What's important? Should you have to realize that you nearly lost your life over a $35 guitar to figure out what's important? I would hope not. But sometimes we need a pretty solid kick in the ass to wake up and figure out what's worth busting our butts over and what's not. So, general common sense, easier said than done. Take time for yourself. But I have too many demands. Yep, you do. Prioritize those demands. Saying no, and this is pure hypocrisy from somebody that like runs BSides and goes to BSides and volunteers and on multiple 501c3 boards. Take time for yourself. Say no occasionally. Turn things off, really off. I'm sure many of you know or know of James Arlen, Jamie Mercurial. The Arlen family has a policy that on Sundays they turn off electronics. And they're not supposed to be on Twitter or anything else. And I know this for a fact because anytime any of them sends me an email or pings me on Twitter or Skype or something, they say, don't tell my husband or wife that, you know, but they do tend to just disconnect as a family, and it makes life better. But I get it. We're attached to these things. We have an unnatural fondness for our toys. Let's do it in little steps. You know what I mean? Things like turn off the stupid pop-up in Outlook that goes ding and pops up every time you get an email. Really? I mean, if you're really waiting for an email that bad, leave an Outlook window open. Otherwise, check it every 5 minutes instead of continuously. Just back away. And if you can really disconnect, don't be the dumbass that goes on an anniversary cruise with your wife along the Inside Passage and blows $350 on internet fees on the cruise ship like me. You know, what an idiot. Get out of Infosec. We love this. So what do? We come here. I'm not saying don't come to BSides. I'm not saying don't, but find things that are at least different. It's like I think Blocksport is kind of interesting because we're still problem solving. We're working on puzzles, but we're not working on code. We're not working on firewalls. We're not working on, we're not doing the same thing. Find interesting things that are at least out of there for some of them. Family and personal time, and maybe time for a career change. That's a real issue. So more general common sense. The slides will be available. Health matters. So I'm not going to point to anybody else in the room, but there's some of us who are no longer in our 20s. There are some of us who are no longer in our 40s. Yeah. Health matters. Growing old sucks. It just does. Growing old sucks. Most days, it is better than the alternative. And I have this outlook on life that, it's, I think people that put just too much effort into being healthy have too much to live for, but I can't see shortening your life intentionally either. And one of the challenges that I've run into is that I keep getting little problems which are really annoying, and they won't kill me fast. They might not even kill me, they just make me miserable over many years. All right, I will deal with the medical and insurance industry to take care of myself. One, because I will suffer less, because it's not like it's going to kill me fast. It's not like I'm going to be struck down by the various things that are wrong with me. I can go into detail if you'd like, but some of you may have had lunch. But anyway, oscopy is a Latin word for you want to put a camera where? So take care of yourself, because also there are other people that you're supposed to be taking care of, and vice versa. Anyway, so health matters. Don't hide from it. When you're 20, you are invincible. When you're 25, it's not medical advice, but when you're 25, let me say this: don't worry, it's not cancer. When you're in your 50s, don't tell yourself that. Don't. Let a doctor tell you that. Or let the doctor tell you, hey, you know what? It is. It's good you came in early, because this is going to be no big deal. So don't put that off. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others. And there we go. General common sense. Don't face challenges alone. We have this industry of loners. I'm fucking special. I'm looking at fun. I made it this far. And so we're all going to do this by ourselves, right? Anybody in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, YMCA, when you're a kid, did you get to go swimming alone, in the canoe alone? Did you get to do anything alone? No, you had a buddy system. Navy SEALs are all over everywhere. They're amazing. Do they do anything alone? No. Everything in between. They have fully automated airplanes to where they hardly need people in the pointy end of the airplane. There's still two competent people in the pointy end of the airplane. We do everything alone. That's not necessarily especially healthy. Here's one. If you happen to have a management role, do not make employees face challenges alone. Friends and family, assets and liabilities simultaneously. Again, mutual support rocks. Takes a little honesty and disconnection to figure out of the friends and family, which are the assets, which are the liabilities, and which are a combination of both. I don't know how many people travel a lot. I travel, I don't know, I'm probably at 50% travel these days, but it varies. I was in San Francisco for 3 weeks straight in February. I was just basically moved into the Drake Hotel in Union Square. Even in a cushy job like mine, the amount of travel I do gets to be tiring. If you've got a more entry-level job, or you're a consultant and you're really cranking the business, and it's what you deliver is what comes home in the paycheck, it can be brutal. Talk to people that have been doing it for a while. Every little trick that you learn that works for you, and that doesn't mean that everybody else's tricks are going to work, makes it a little bit better. If you have routines, one of the things that I know works for me is, I'm a list person, but I have routines of what goes to certain types of events. I have packed kits of technology bits that I take to certain types of events, and they're in little plastic boxes. They're in little clear plastic boxes, so when I go through TSA, if it's in carry-on, I can whip it out so that when they freak out about the amount of electronics we travel with, it's like, no worries, right? And now that has become actually a bigger problem because I do enough international travel, I get global entry, so I get TSA pre, so they don't care at real airports because they have my fingerprints, therefore I can't be a terrorist. But but I've got this routine, and it makes it a lot easier. And I open the lid, I've got a couple different size boxes, and I open the lid of the box, and I do have the list of what belongs in there, but if the box is not full, something's missing, because I pack them that tightly. Just that alone, if you do what I do and do trade ships, that's a big deal. Some people insist on moving into the hotel room as soon as they land. And that makes them feel better, because you open drawers to grab your shirts and whatever. Whatever works for you. Find those little routines just to make it more routine. It'll be better, it's just a little better. You can make it suck less. Here's a tip. I'm not advocating drinking to excess. That's a different set of talks that I do, which is pretty fun. I'm not kidding, I've done it. But it's very limited number of places that will let you get on stage with a friend and serve 80 to 100 cocktails in a 1-hour presentation. Venues like this tend to frown on us popping 5 or 6 pints of booze and a couple of quarts and liters and mixers and fruits, and it gets kind of messy. It was fun. Bartenders, if you are not opposed to this, here's another one of those unfair to women, depending on your personality and age. As guys, you go and sit at the bar and have dinner at the bar, and I don't care. I don't mind dining alone. I do it enough. It's all right. You sit with the bartender, have a conversation. The bartender knows what's happening in the community most of the time. Here in Orlando, maybe not as much. There's so many transients. But in most places, your bartender is a better source of information than the concierge at the hotel. If you're staying in a hotel with a concierge, Motel 6 doesn't really have a concierge. There's that lady that hangs out with the truckers in the parking lot, but that's not concierge. She knows some stuff, but still, I wouldn't ask her. But the bartender's not getting a kickback from every restaurant and theater and club like the concierge is. And so you have a conversation. Now, that's a little less comfortable for women sometimes, and that's unfortunate, but it depends on where you are, what the city is, what the hotel is. Ask them about tips and tricks as far as, what's it take to get to the airport? How do I beat this? They may say something like, don't take a cab, are you kidding? Are you traveling light? Yes. Okay, $8.45. You get on BART over there, and you get out at the airport. It'll be faster and less grief, and you don't have to deal with a cabbie. And other times they'll say, public transit in this city, are you nuts? Put it on the company card. That sort of stuff will make a real difference. And if you're on a circuit like I am, Tina's got a couple more hours on at Frankie's in Vegas. I know the bartender's schedule at a couple of bars, but but I also know the tips and tricks. This word it's all cut off, but the word water is in there. This is a really obvious one. People tell you to hydrate. Getting an airplane sucks water out of you. Drinking too much coffee because you're on the road and not getting enough sleep, that sucks water out of you. Drinking booze, which some of us sometimes do, sucks water out of you. This is not a commercial announcement or product placement, but Mike Murray hooked me up with these things. Gatorade is great, but too sugary, and those sort of drinks. If you like the coconut water, that's great, but you're still carrying liquids which don't go through TSA. NUUN, Noon, there's some other brands. This one just happens to be easy to get. Tastes horrible. They're electrolyte tabs. They're made for healthy people. I think they're originally designed for triathletes. It's like a giant Alka-Seltzer. Drop a tab in a 16-ounce bottle of water, or crack it in half and put it in the 2 crappy little, we can only afford to give you 8 ounces of water on the airplane bottles. And it's an electrolyte tab. It's got some potassium and other electrolytes, and it actually will help you hydrate, hold in some water, and life just gets better. And the more water you drink, the less booze you drink, the less coffee you drink. It just makes life a lot better. It's amazing what a difference proper hydration makes. If you've had too much to drink, that's part of the booze talks to his recovery. But on that, don't listen to me, because one of these days I will act my age, and when that day happens, you will see the funeral announcement. Here's what makes a difference for a lot of people, which only works for us and other crazy people like us who love what we do, love the challenges of what we do, if not the way the job plays out. Do more work. Do more work, but do work that you want to do. Work which is satisfying and rewarding. Because if you're at a point in your job or in your career where it's really not satisfying, but it's the industry you want to be in, maybe there's something that you can do on a volunteer basis, or maybe even a part-time gig, which will make you excited about what you're doing again, or tide you over. You know, maybe you're in an industry that's at a slump right now, and you just want to stick into it. Do satisfying work that you want to do. Volunteer, mentor, teach, speak, share, help people. For some people, this is really hard. A lot of this social interaction stuff has gotten easier for me the older I get. A lot of us tend to be introverts that are drawn into this. The older I get, the less I care if I screw up. It's like, go ahead and top DEF CON 2 years ago at the PCI panel. Once again, let me say I'm sorry, Alex.
That was just fun.
It was great. I still have to apologize to Corman every time I see him for that one, but he's sensitive.
I think it's the entire Arabic community you need to apologize.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. Yeah. It's only DEF CON. So anyway, mentoring is great, and it doesn't have to be formal mentorship. But if there are people that could benefit from the mistakes you've made and the successes you've made, share that with them. And one of the really cool things about mentorship, after you get over the initial pain of it, is it holds up it puts you under a spotlight and hands you a mirror to your own hypocrisies. Because you will tell people things that I've told people, like, don't let your skill set become stale, Mr. MCSE on NT4. You know, don't stay in dead-end jobs too long. 22 years in the car business. No, I take it back. 27, 28 years in the car business. 22 for one dealer group. You know, so I'm like, oh, if only I could take my own advice. Oh shit, I know how to do this better. Okay. But there's nothing like turning your own hypocrisy back on yourself and making stuff better. So, really? Isaac Newton, famous quote. Part of this quote is actually on some British pound coins. If I've seen further, it's only by standing on the shoulders of giants. Newton, who changed the way we look at the world forever, this is not an original quote of his, it's a variant of older quotes. So even he borrowed this. The guy that changed the way we view the world forever said, I got where I am because other people helped me get here. Oh shit. That kind of puts a burden on all of us, doesn't it? As Gandhi said on Twitter a few years ago, the problem with altruism is there's nothing in it for me, right? Actually, I think it was Lincoln who complained about the problem with attribution on Twitter, but that's a different talk. So what's in it for you? You feel better, you contribute, you feel better about yourself, you make connections, you network, you improve your career options, you strengthen your resume. If just being a decent person isn't enough for you, there's more in it than just being altruistic. Learn something new, but education is work. It has to be satisfying or offer hope of career improvement. Or maybe it's time for a change. Mike Murray and Lee, whose last name I'm blanking on, their career talk, one of the things they stress is the best job in the world for you is probably the one you have right now. But it probably needs a little bit of tuning. And so that's those little changes. You know, maybe your job can evolve at the company you're at or the organization you're with. Maybe you can switch from one team to another. Where I am now at Tenable, we move people around a lot until they land in the right space. A lot of times people come in, they land in support, learn the product, and then they land in QA or dev or content. Or maybe it's time for a big change. And this is that career change thing. It may be time to change. And with the economy and the market what it is now, if you think that your job is hopeless, this is probably about as good as it's going to get for making a career change, or a job change, not a career change. Just don't bounce around too much. In the workplace, as a manager, as an employer, as a team leader, do you have too many well-trained and qualified employees? It's too easy to hire people. Yeah, no. So can you afford to burn any out, even if you think they're all useless? No. And if they're truly useless, you need to get rid of them. So I will read this since it's getting caught up. But the capacity to influence policies, especially those with a direct impact on a staff member's work, reduces susceptibility to burnout. This is a 1991 study, frequently cited in the Maslach burnout and other burnout studies. This has been true for centuries before this, and will be true for centuries more. I won't read this whole thing, but basically, if you've got some feeling of control, you get engaged with work. If you don't, you are not. If you're an employer, consistent feedback. Yeah, a lot of us get moved up the food chain, right, Peter Principle, right up to our level of incompetence, and we really suck at managing people, and now we have to manage people. There's a whole cycle of that that's crazy, but consistent feedback. Manage workloads and workload distribution. Let's come back to, related to this, is explain why things are the way they are if you can't fix them. Because a lack of control is a torture method. How do you torture Manuel Noriega? You put him in a mansion. Breakfast never comes the same time 2 days in a row. Cable goes out for 30 minutes, twice a week. Who knows when? He wants his eggs over easy. Some days they're hockey pucks, some days they're 2 run. Think I'm kidding? That's the way you follow the Geneva Convention on a long-term prisoner without doing anything extreme, the loss of control. The opposite extreme of that is solitary confinement, where they're total loss of control. Even though there's regulation, they don't have a clock to get access to time. It's completely shattering at that level. But a little bit of a loss of control is just a minor annoyance. You add them all up, we've got some problems. Allow employees to disconnect, maybe even force it. One of the things Volkswagen is doing in Germany, I don't think they're doing it in the US, because I'm not a fan of the company that's in the US, even though there are 2 of their cars in my driveway. The Germans disable email accounts for certain people when they are not on the job. They disable your BlackBerry or Nokia or whatever they're using. They disable your ability to connect to the company mail server when you're supposed to be gone. You can't get your mail. No, you're not supposed to. Disconnect. Go home and see your family. That's kind of cool. Offer education. We all like to learn stuff, in this community especially. Offering education as an employer is a good way to keep people in bad situations. I'm not saying we should do that, but it's a good way to keep people in bad situations. That, got a couple of minutes here for questions, but that's, the idea is, look, there's a bunch of smart people that are interested, engaged, you're here on a weekend. You want to further yourself and further the people around you, and if we let ourselves and each other get burned out, we're not effective. That's one. If we don't operate as effectively as possible, we don't accomplish what we want to do. I think one of the things we see, we set high standards for ourselves. One of the real challenges that's really critical in reaching out to people, on flipping to the dark side of this study, these studies, the one trend that seems really solid is if you think you're doing well and your company is breached, there are other scenarios, but we've seen a handful of people where we can identify it a lot more anecdotally. You're cranking along, you think you're efficient, turns out that your company is eaten out, upside down, inside out, and your whole security team or whatever you do is an abject failure. Some people bounce back and use that as a learning experience, but depending on the context and the support they get, they go from working ridiculous hours, but they're not exhausted because they're succeeding. And they instantly flip and go from feeling highly efficient to very cynical, and the exhaustion goes from I can handle this because I'm accomplishing stuff to boom, and we see these crashes. And that's where having friends that keep an eye on each other makes a difference. Because then we can say, Hoff, you know, firing us moved us forward. We had to get back in the game. Probably weren't happy when that initially happened, right? There are things that can happen. But anyway, that's my spiel. Don't tell anybody I want you to be happy. I've got a reputation to defend, but really, cool. Comments, questions, suggestions? Yes, sir. Oh, okay. Anybody? Cool. Well, thank you all very much. Still more to come. Here we go. Let's be inspirational. Does everybody know this one? Since I got a minute, I'm gonna do this. I stick it at the end. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, diverting myself now and then, finding a smoother pebble or prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered before me. Isaac Newton felt that he was just a boy on the beach distracted by pebbles and shells. This community, BSides, your local hacker communities, this is where you find your pebbles.